This lesson is on the water cycle. The hydrosphere is the portion of the earth that is composed of water. So anytime we refer to the hydrosphere, we're talking about all of the water on earth. Water covers over 70% of Earth's surface. 97% of that water is ocean water and is salty, and then the remaining 3% is fresh water. Earth's water is constantly being cycled through the atmosphere, ocean, land, and organisms such as plant and animals. This process, known as the water cycle, is driven by energy from the sun. The water cycle is crucial to the existence of life on our planet. Without the water cycle, there would be no life here on planet Earth. Now, here we have an example of the complete picture here. When you're working on your assignments, this would be a great picture to come back to, especially if you feel bogged down by the reading and feel like it's too much information to take in at one time. In the form of literature, you can look at this and it tells a lot of the story with very little reading. All right, let's talk first about evaporation. So during evaporation, the sun heats up liquid water and changes it into water vapor. Water that evaporates from Earth's oceans, lakes, rivers, and moist soil rises up into the atmosphere. Transpiration. Transpiration occurs when water evaporates from within plants. You can almost think of this as like plants sweating. Like when we sweat, we lose water. The plants, they lose water from transpiration. So plant leaves have pores through which they exchange gases with the environment. They absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen and water vapor. And when they release water vapor through these pores, we refer to it as transpiration. All right, condensation. As water vapor, that water in the form of a gas, rises higher in the atmosphere, it starts to cool, and when it cools enough, it becomes a liquid again. We call this process condensation. When a large amount of water vapor condenses, clouds form. Precipitation. When enough water vapor in the atmosphere condenses, it falls back down to the earth in the form of rain, snow, or ice, and we call this precipitation. So it doesn't matter if it's rain, snow, ice, hail, whatever form it's in. If it's water in any state of matter coming down on the earth, we call it precipitation. Infiltration and runoff. When precipitation falls on land, some of the water is absorbed into the ground. We've definitely talked about this before. This process is called infiltration, and it forms groundwater. So when the water initially seeps into the ground and becomes groundwater, we call it infiltration. Other precipitation that can't infiltrate, it's going to run off and it's going to end up going to the lowest point it can reach, which is usually a stream, a river, or other body of water. Okay, so we call this water that collects in rivers, streams, oceans, or some other low-lying place, we call it runoff. Most groundwater and runoff eventually returns to the ocean. Any water that does not readily infiltrate or run off can eventually evaporate. Here are some other important hydrology terms that we need to know. Percolation. This is the process by which water that's already underground, that is already infiltrated, moves through the soil because gravity is moving it along. The soil must be permeable. We've talked about this before. It has to have enough pores and enough spaces through which the water can flow. Okay. Now it's very important that we do not mix up infiltration and percolation. Infiltration is when the water first enters the soil, and then percolation is any movement of that water through the soil after infiltration occurs. Aquifer, we've talked about this all semester long. This is an underground layer of rock, sand, gravel, what have you, soil that can store and carry water because it is porous, it is permeable. Also, the water table, this is the highest level where underground water is found. So if you were to go outside and start digging The point at which you hit groundwater, that's the water table, where you first see water. All right. The water table can go up and down depending on how much infiltration and percolation there is in your area, and also how much water is being extracted from the ground by humans. So here we have another picture that could be very helpful to you while you're doing your assignment. It shows all of these different things we've been talking about in one nice, neat picture that shows, you know, the entire picture that we're trying to impart on you right now. All right, a couple more terms. A watershed. This is an area of land in which all the runoff flows to one central location. It may not look like it, but a lot of areas of land are kind of bowl-shaped, even if it's ever so slightly. All right, so when it rains on the surface of the earth, water, aided by gravity, if it doesn't infiltrate, it runs off. But either way, whether it infiltrates or runs off, it tends to go to the lowest area that gravity can take it. And usually this is, a low-lying area where it can infiltrate, or it's a stream or a river or a pond or a lake or the ocean in some cases. A river basin is a watershed for which all of the runoff flows into a river. Okay, so a river basin is just a very specific type of watershed. It's a watershed for which a river is that central lowest lying location.